Hello, my name is Francis Fox. I'm the trained remote viewer, trained in interspecies communication. I have a degree from the University of Miami. I established a business 50 some years ago, and it's still running today. Turned it over, sold it to somebody in my family, but it's still running. It's still very successful. Why am I saying that? I'm not saying it to brag. I'm saying it because I need for you to know that I understand business, know business, love business. I'm not a flake. I'm also a military mind control victim. I was sex trafficked. Unfortunately, I was sex trafficked to Kennedy when I was between 12 and 14 years of age. That will come up at some point in terms of whatever. So I'm going to review the map, and I'm doing today. I want to give you, I hope, my last chapter in my book on Francis Fox, The Adventures of a Psychic Spy. But it's going to be fiction. Remember that. And I'll remind you several times as I tell you what's in the last chapter. And then you can maybe send me put some notes there on YouTube and tell me if you think that that's not really, nobody's going to believe that, Francis. So why don't you change it a little bit so people can believe it and make it fiction, but maybe a little bit believable. But let's go to the US map first. It looks good. Kansas, oh, this is yesterday's map. That is so interesting. Give me a second so I can get you today's map. Hmm. 922. That's today. So why is that? It's a very exciting chapter. So when I tell you about the chapter, you'll go, well, I can certainly see why you would be a little bit distracted. And now it's processing, and now it's up. Nope, that's yesterday's. And yet I'm looking at it and it says, okay, you need to give me a second. And if you're too impatient, that's your problem. And I sent it from my phone. Because what it says about Kansas is totally the opposite of what's going on. Yesterday was one thing, and today it's another. I think people have been really busy. Oh, now, I see what it is. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Here we go. I do need a secretary and assistant or whatever people, and not somebody who lives in India. I need somebody right here. I'm not real good at this stuff. Here we go. Get that out of there. And here we go. I think a lot of things happened today. A lot of things happened today in the United States. A lot of good things. And they are on the map. I love these little maps. I don't have to think. And nobody can call me on anything. I could just say, no, that's the map. You know, whatever it is that guided my hand to do the map, you should speak to them. And it does not usually take this long to process. And if it, if I show you the map, it gets all distorted. There we go. Here we go. So the United States has a spiraling of love, that's pink energy, and that is counterclockwise, which means grounding. We have the huge, strong pyramid, which we were able to stop the energies of the earthquake in the Pacific a couple of weeks ago. When there was a tsunami, we constructed with our minds, which is how you create reality, in the Pacific, a lot of these green pyramids. And surprisingly, science said there were not a lot of tsunamis. They didn't understand why, but they were very happy. Okay, go to the top. It says bad guys in shock. Kansas shot down. And then the next word is from me. It says finally. I've been indicating that Kansas The Air Force Base there should be looked into, having to do with being the center of military mind control. And I did this map at 4:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Florida looks great. Remember that channel's Helpful Friends, and there's a heart there. The east coast of Texas looks great. You can barely see it. But then something really interesting. The words deep state with an X on top of them, on top of those two words, which means they've been X'd out, and then X's all the way around them, which means they are in check. They're in check. They can't move. I am not happy with the fact that right there, that's right where Elon is. But I do know that they have been. Let me check and see if I can say this. My master said, go. They have been messing with Elon's stock. The way they can mind control people, they can control a lot of other things. And we need to know this. We need to know this. It gives me pleasure to say it because I have most of my investments are in Tesla. And of course, because some people still think I'm on the edge of crazy. It's like, well, you're going to take that risk? Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take that risk. We should all invest in what we believe in. And then the good stuff that we believe in has more of a chance of making it really big. That doesn't need to happen with Tesla. Elon is strong enough to make that happen, even if the whole world goes against him, because he believes so deeply in what he's doing and how good it is for humanity. He's going to make it. By the way, they finally said it. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they said it a lot. How significantly less number of people are going to die in the world with the self-driving cars. I think that should be on the rooftops of every building. As I have said, when the money starts to come in for me, and it will, because a lot of people owe me money and a lot of people need to be sued, so they don't do the kind of stuff that they've done to me, I'm going to buy 5 Teslas, one for each one of my grandkids. I'm not going to buy it for my children because I don't want an argument, because they will probably see that as me controlling them. So let's go to the exciting part of this chat. I'm writing a book. It's called Frances Fox, The Adventures of a Psychic Spy. Here's the latest chapter. So yesterday I told you that I was very nervous because I had picked up that this is a novel, The Cuban Mafia, and I was doing a ritual. It's not just a ritual, a surgery, complicated, that would last 3 days. Yesterday was a center day because yesterday was an eclipse. So if you're going to do black magic stuff, the day of an eclipse is great because it's powerful. So it was the day before yesterday, and then today was the last day. And this is a movie. Well, see, I already know that my book is going to sell into a movie. This is a book, and this is a chapter, maybe the last chapter. I'm not sure I can get anything more exciting than this. Dreadfully exciting. So I said that they had a setup, and it was in a building, an office building, a block away, I think, from the Ritz-Carlton in Coconut Grove, 2 blocks from the marina. They needed to be close to a marina. They had to dispose of a body. So the setup was, and I believe the person they were doing this for was my control, Rene de Villegas. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm totally obsessed with him. That's okay. Let's pretend it was my handler, not control, my handler, Rene de Villegas. Their family's not going to sue me. As a matter of fact, they're going to start throwing properties at me and money, all sorts of things, because they want to support this getting this fantasy out to the world. It's obviously not real. So I didn't know if I wanted to put it in the book, in this chapter, about the fact that they kidnapped a young man in his maybe late 20s, because Rene de Villegas wanted his youth back and his looks. It's very important to him, the whole sex thing and how he looks and all the rest of that. So they were going to do a transference of vitality and youth and maybe even looks from this poor guy that they had on a hospital bed, but it was in this office, which I know has been used for plastic surgery. But remember, this is a novel. But I know it's been used for plastic surgery. So they do have a surgery type setup. And from there, with some black magicians in Mexico doing, I'm not sure if it was continuous ceremonies or several hours a day, but it was supported energetically and spiritually by some brujos, curanderos in Mexico doing these dark rituals to transfer the stuff from this young man who never agreed to this. And the plan was that he he would die or he would be dead. I don't know which of the two. And they're very close to the marina, so they would just stuff him in the car and go 2 blocks and put him in a boat and take him out to the Gulf of the the bay right there, but take him further out to where the currents mix, so his body would be taken further out. That was yesterday. I was like, oh my God, what a story. And I said, I think this is like a type of cloning. So then today comes, and I felt so much better that I said it, almost like it was real. Oh my goodness, it was almost like it was real. So today I went ahead and I asked my group, once we did the mantras on rage, which I needed to do today because I was ready to kill everybody. I was so angry today. And I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and look into this. It's a story. And I said, it's an opportunity to look at, maybe we can see what people do with cloning and everything. So I gave them the example, which is a story about the coconut grove and this young man. There was not a lot of information because it was kind of weird. They were kind of wondering how come I was asking them to contribute to the last chapter in my book. And the young man, they didn't kill the young man. They actually, everything that I do is seen minute to minute, not just by the Cuban mafia, but by several governments around the world, because I'm connecting the dots in the book having to do with spying and human consciousness and doing stuff to people and they don't even know it because they don't even know that it's possible to do that. So all my chats, even the long ones where we do all that work, the Mantrista movement, they're followed. Every second of the chat is followed. Remember, this is a story that's for the last chapter of my book. So from yesterday, they would have heard my chat that I did in English, which hopefully you've seen already. And so they were already scrambling and picking up and packing, and they took the young man. And what we were able to see today is that they packed him into a car and they went to, in the book, this is just the book, this is not true, to the darkest place in Miami, which is a beautiful little island that the major judges and lawyers in Miami have tended to live on. Today, it's not so exclusive. Today, it's more available to more people. But for decades, that island, if you blew it up, the whole legal system of, I think, of Miami would have gone under. This is just a story. And in chapter 2 in the book, this book that I'm writing, I said that the Cuban mafia ran me out of there because I rented a place there because I love the water and it's an island. It's gorgeous. It's right in downtown Coconut Grove. They ran me out of there. And the organization that runs Grove Isle, the head of it, used to work for the Federal Reserve. She wouldn't even answer my emails, which were very detailed with information. Okay. I got run out of there. Probably a good thing because the Cuban mafia in the book, it's just a joke. It's not a joke. It's a novel. Come on. You guys read novels all the time. I think some of this books that sell millions of copies, they're novel. We know they're not true. Okay. So they went there. They went from this place in Coconut Grove, that's a mini surgery thing, with the guy alive, the poor young man. I figured he would have been dead by now. Rene de Villegas does not give up. They went to Grove Isle. And from there, and some of the people saw in the chat that they had taken him to some place where there were docks. Well, Grove Isle, half of Grove Isle, one side is docks for the boats of the residents. So the trick of the matter is that pulling this all together in my head, I was, of course, a nervous wreck because I identify with what it is that I'm writing and I get really into it. That's why I think it's going to be a really good book. It's going to sell a lot. And I need all these disclaimers that this is obviously not true. But I've been dealing with a pain at the bottom of my spine that is extremely intense, and I haven't been able to figure it out. But then, because of this storyline that I'm piecing together, and I can read you one of the people, because I told the people in the chat, I said, I know this is too long. We've been here an hour and some minutes having to do with the rage mantra. And then I asked them to read this very unusual thing from my book, this scenario that I wanted to put in my book. And so I said, if you get anything interesting, just send me an email. And somebody did send me an email that was rather interesting. If I can find it quickly, I will read it, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go back to that this evening. And we're going to just do the chat exclusively on this storyline that's so fascinating because people are interested. Oh, this person's a clone and the other person's a clone. What do you do with clones? You put them in jail. It's not the same person anymore. We want to understand more. And you know that sometimes books are like prophecies. The stuff comes out in fiction, like science fiction, and then it turns out to be true, but later on. So who knows? The trick of the matter is I have this pain at the base of my spine, and I did have emergency spinal surgery decades ago. And before it, they had to do a myelogram, which they inject something in your spine, and guaranteed 25 years later, you have cancer. The doctor, by the way, he's Cuban. His name was Jorge Picasa. So when they're doing the myelogram and I'm laying face down in a table and they're injecting this in me, when I look up, there's these three guys standing there looking at me and my body. They weren't doctors. Oh, interesting. Making sure that nothing unusual happens here. The doctor, um, no, yes. I'm getting my storyline a little confused. No, Jorge Picasa, he was the neurosurgeon that was in charge. So anyway, then years later, I had a hysterectomy because according to my gynecologist, I could have a stroke if I got pregnant. I actually think I already had one. I think that's why my lip is doing this strange thing right here. But that's not part of the storyline. So years later, I had a hysterectomy. And something happened during the hysterectomy that my gynecologist was furious and was screaming. And later on, he told me that he had told everybody that had to deal with me that they had to make sure that they were very careful with me and gentle with me. And he was furious. And I could tell that there had been some interference in my surgery, which he was not saying. What he basically was, my gynecologist was out of control with rage and said that nobody was supposed to touch me. And it was hysterectomy, which is pretty routine. So I have this pain in the bottom of my spine. And I had recognized, remember, this is just a storyline. This is in Mercy Hospital, right next to Grove Isle. I mean, I'm talking, you could spit. So I have this pain, and this afternoon, yesterday, and today, it has been unbearable to where all I want to do is cry, but it's an unusual pain. It's like really deep, intense, and hot. And I had already suspected, which is what I'm going to put in the book, that they had put in some kind of an implant. And I had heard through the grapevine that they didn't understand how come I was still standing because after that implant, they should have been able to put me in a wheelchair with no problem. So then I got to thinking, this is for the book. I'm just thinking, Mercy Hospital. Mercy Hospital. Oh, on top of Mercy Hospital, there's a huge radionics machine that radiates half of Miami. I've never said that before, but this is just for a book. There's a couple more in Miami, but it's on top of Mercy Hospital. What a coincidence. And this is so cute. This is just for a book. We know one of the people there, who, by the way, never told anybody, and I've had him over for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, Anglo-American, that he's related to George Washington. Now that's true. This part of it is true. May go into the book, but doesn't it make for an exciting psychic spy? You're dealing with somebody and they're Anglo in this totally Hispanic group community, and you're related to George Washington and you never tell anybody, and you're one of the most important people in Mercy Hospital, and you know a lot about electronics, and there's a huge electronic device on top of the building. I'm not sure that that storyline is strong enough to put in the book. Maybe I'll ask him the next time I see him, which would be either Thanksgiving or Christmas. Now, when I asked his girlfriend about the whole George Washington thing, she was like, "What?" But when I asked him, he just went, but you can look it up in Google and other interesting things. So I need to figure out where I put that, because maybe it's like too wild. George Washington, original families of the United States, cloning, radiating an entire city, a major Catholic hospital. Maybe that's too far-fetched. So I have to think about it. What I'm going to do about that. But it's okay, because I don't really have a deadline. I haven't sold the book yet because I haven't been able to meet anybody. But I think it should be, the title is great. Frances Fox, The Adventures of a Psychic Spy. So anyway, so if this were true, I would wish that this young man somehow could get away and survive and live. And if this were true, I would like to read this more closely, because I think this is what the cloning is all about. It's not a mask on your face. Maybe they do that too. Absolutely. But the whole thing with Miami is such a great place to write a psychic, a novel on spying, because Richard Nixon had a huge compound on Key Biscayne, which is totally Cuban mafia. And when Richard Nixon was going, first place, when my control died, I was kind of like hanging in the wind, I guess, in terms of who they were going to assign me to. And they decided to assign me after a particular date, because there was something going on. I don't really remember what it was. I was going to be assigned to Richard Nixon, who was re-entering politics at that point. So that you can look up in the history books, when he was going to re-enter, which should have been in the 90s. But more important than that, because of my skills having to do with consciousness and dying, because of the hole I have in the top of my head, according to the Buddhists, that's an entry. You can enter, my consciousness can enter and exit this hole that I have here. It's not a fontanelle. And I can enter and exit as I want. Apparently, at least 2 politicians. One politician and the guy that was ahead of my control had a petition that when they died, I was supposed to take them to where they wanted to go. And that was the case with Richard Nixon. Interesting. So I think I'm going to finish with this chat. I think I have a couple of other notes, but I just needed to tell you about the incident having to do with, because of its relationship. That's why it's timely, because yesterday was the eclipse. It was also, I think, an equinox, which makes it triply powerful. So this cloning, and I'm going to use the word cloning until somebody can explain what cloning is, which I think that they can't. I'm going to call it cloning. Um, Now, remember that this is just a novel. This group that I'm talking about, in case you didn't hear yesterday's podcast, this is the group that when I was 11, the US intelligence sent me to Cuba. Castro had just come in, 60, 59, 59, 59, 60, right? Um, and I was a US intelligence asset, and they set up a ritual in which they had this very powerful black magician have sex with me, and they put a bullet in his head while in the act of sex, and they had a ritual which I don't remember seeing, and they transferred his skills to me. Is that cloning? I don't actually know what that is, but it's a transference of energies from a person. In this case, they murdered him. And remember that Schiff, Adam Schiff, and Rene de Villegas were scrambling and fighting to reach me in the astral dimensions, not physically. What I'm talking about happened in Cuba was physical. What happens in the astral is still real, but it doesn't involve a physical body. Remember that Adam Schiff and Rene de Villegas used to be trying, they would stalk me at night. They needed to feed off of my energy. I don't think it was through sex at night in the astral, but I don't know how they do that, but it is obviously done rather easily. So it's going to be a good novel. I'm sure it'll be made into a movie. And I'm sure people will go, oh, I know that island. Oh, yeah, dark. Interesting. How people in the light don't want to see the dark. When I got run out of Grove Isle, I was the crazy one because I had worked with Dr. Colin Ross 30 years prior. He specializes in military mind control victims and cult victims and satanic victims. And he was the guy that my psychologist from the goddamn University of Miami said that I had to work with, or they would not work with me any longer. Because ethically, psychologists can't work with you if you're still in danger, which I obviously was, and they knew that. There was no question ever with any of them. Now we have to question who they were working with. There was no question. There was not a single, there was only one funny story. There was only one psychologist that did not believe me, and she had not worked with me. So apparently she was a top dog in the psychologists of the University of Miami. So the psychologists that were working with me said, this woman's not lying. So she said, okay, so let me check to make sure. So they sent me to her and she did hypnosis. Honestly, another lawsuit. She did hypnosis, and what came up, and I don't know how we got there or what it was. I remembered a murder that I was 7 or 8 years old, and I saw my father and this other man murder this young girl. And so I came out of the session, and the therapist, the psychologist, who was very judgmental, we went into that with her thinking, I'm going to debunk Francis Fox's storyline that all my other psychologists that I supervise, they believe her, but I know that's not possible. So when we got out of the session, she knew that it was accurate because they can tell, I guess, and it wasn't a memory that I had. It came up through hypnosis. And then, very judgmental woman, she looks at me and she says, well, what are you going to do about this? I was 7 or 8 years old. I said, I don't know. What am I supposed to do about this? She said, I don't know. Just wondering what you're going to do with this. And she sent me home. So, you know what I did with it? The next day, I called the German embassy and I told them the story and the year, kind of, and the town that we lived in next to the military base. And they took the story and then they Okay. I gave him my name. The psychologist told me I had to do something about it. God, am I a fool? And they started calling me back 2 days later, and I wouldn't return their calls because by that time I got back to my regular therapist, and I told her I went to this woman. You sent me to. This came up, and my therapist is like sweating bullets, and I said, so I went ahead and I called the German embassy, and the therapist was like, the psychologist, oh my God, why did you do that? I said, because this woman that you sent me to said, what was I going to do about it? So I did something. Anyway, I never returned the call from the German embassy. But I did get a visit from a CIA agent who actually, this is how arrogant the intelligence community is in this country. When he came to visit me in my building, he signed in his name or whatever name he gave, CIA agent. No problem. He, ah, not good. Okay. We will see you again. And I hope you like my storyline, but if you have any thoughts about it, do you think it's like a little bit too wild? The Miami scene is absolutely, this is absolutely, if stuff like this is going to happen, this is absolutely where it's going to happen. And Coconut Grove, my God, you can get in a boat, in and out, nobody pays attention to you. The whole administration is bought and paid for. The Federal Reserve sent somebody in there. That's how important it is. And it was so funny because the people on the island, when she got elected, they were like so proud that we could have had somebody from the Federal Reserve as the president of the association. And then she wouldn't even respond to my emails that were several pages long, and I gave a copy personally to her husband. But of course, who knows what that's all about? So I'm going to quit now because I have my Mantrisa group waiting for me. And after that, we're going to go into my adventure, my last chapter. Why am I saying my last chapter? Because if I can do that map and it shows the deep state X'd out, and then all those X's around it, and at the top, I don't remember what it said. I think we're nearing the end and the bad guys are going to be exposed. And hopefully, all of you will understand, and maybe it will be through my fiction book that you will understand how little you know about yourself. And if you happen to have a grandchild who is a genius, wouldn't they love to do a transfer of some of his skills to one of their own? So when in the 90s, the mothers started saying, the government's coming after our children, and I thought they were crazy. No, not so. It's a lot to learn in order to be able to keep yourself safe in a world where honestly, darkness has run circles around all of them, all of us, not them. Maybe it's them, in the sense that I was a witness to a lot of stuff that I still don't remember. But as soon as I remember, I will be sharing, even if it's in a fiction book. Thank you for joining me.